want to welcome Dr. Madison to our session today. He's going to be our facilitator. So let's welcome Dr. Madison. And Dr. Madison, you have the floor.
All right. So I'm definitely excited to give this talk today. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about, particularly as relates to research and just the career options that are out there. I think when I started out my PhD journey, I didn't realize just the amount of diversity and career options that exist in science. And so today I hope to highlight some of the unique options that are out there that you may not have even heard about. So let's dive in. But I do want to give a little background about my own journey in STEM. So I'm from Alabama originally. I was born and raised just outside of Mobile in a rural community. And so when I decided to go into science, I didn't have any family members who had been in science. All of my family really have learned trades and are in construction. So I really didn't have kind of a role model in science. And so I spent some time kind of meandering through the career options that are available in STEM. But when I started out, I planned to go into medicine because that's the only thing I really knew about in science. And so it was through many experiences in my undergraduate career that I came across, really got interested in research, and here I am now. So it's really, I would say, embrace all the opportunities that science has to offer, and be open to new ideas and new options that you hadn't previously thought about. So now I'm an immunologist by training. I study the lung in particular. And I also have a passion for STEM education, teaching physiology, biology, you name it. But my research interests are really with electronic cigarettes. So I study vaping and how that affects the lungs function, and have studied that for some time. I also study cigarette smoking as well. So we look at how nicotine products affect the lungs function. But there's been quite a journey getting to this point. But I think you guys are in a great position because you're early enough. I didn't have a career seminar when I was in my undergraduate education. I didn't know about these careers, and it wasn't until later in my graduate training, my PhD training, that I found out about some of these careers. So I'm hoping to expose them to you early, and so that maybe you can start finding opportunities to really get experiences and learn and grow in these areas. All right, so what you should know, though, is the possibilities are endless for PhD scientists. Don't limit yourself to necessarily the academic research. Don't feel like you have to go into medicine or professional school. Feel free at this point in your career to explore and see what it's out there, because really there are a variety of opportunities that you can find yourself where you fit at in the puzzle piece. One thing I always want to encourage students is really to recognize your unique talents. You're unique as a person. You have distinct characteristic talents and skills that set you apart from other people. And so recognize those and find a career that really fits that and helps and can really cultivate that in you. And so there are several tools that are available to do that. I don't know if any of you have done an individual development plan, and I had not when I was an undergraduate, but there is a website here through the AAAS, and it's called My IDP, or an individual development plan. And I have the link here. I'm also going to make all of this PowerPoint available to you, and it enables you to go in and kind of look at your skills, your interests, and your values, and it helps kind of guide you into a career that really fits your uniqueness as a person. So I'm going to go through some of the steps that I did, because it's just easier for me to show snapshots of what goes on with this website instead of sharing it and having to go back and forth. So what will happen when you go to the website, you type in that URL, you'll see that it'll have a welcome page. It'll tell you, and you can pick the option that is your first time here. It's a free service. All you'll need is your university email, and you'll set up an account. And you can set up an account and have them send you reminders about your plan, what you're doing to to reach out and find opportunities in the fields that you're interested in. But you just click that link there, and then you can set up your IDP. And how that works is it'll get you to evaluate your scientific skills. I should say that this particular IDP is really geared towards scientists with a research interest, or with an interest, just scientists in general, not necessarily research driven. What it'll do is it'll ask you about your skills. And in this particular snapshot here, you can see that it asked me about my knowledge of science, critical evaluation of scientific literature, how I rated my skills in those areas. It also asked about writing skills. So you'll go through that, and it takes some time, and you'll rank your skill level, 1 being highly deficient and 5 being highly proficient. My advice here is to be honest. You're the only one that's going to see this, really. So you can be transparent and don't feel like you have to, make yourself look better than you are. If you're not a good writer, indicate that, because then it won't skew your analysis in any way. And then from that, and that takes about 15 to 20 minutes to do when you're having to go through each of those questions. You'll do another assessment. It's a little cumbersome, but it's worth it in the end, I promise. Where it'll give you an interest assessment. And so what you'll do is indicate what interests you on a scale. Do you like designing experiments? Yes or no, and you'll indicate, yes, I would like to do that in my career, or no, I really wouldn't want to do that as a career. It'll talk about presentations, writing again, reading papers in the field. So you'll go through this, and again, it takes about 15 to 20 minutes to kind of figure out where your interests lie, and then you'll click submit to that, and you'll go to your final assessment. Only one more, and that will allow you to evaluate your values as it pertains to a career. And this is really important because your values are going to help you find significance in your career. So do you value helping society? Is that something you want to be a part of your career? Teamwork, is that important to you? Do you want a congenial atmosphere, competition? Do you want to be able to have a fast-paced environment, or does that stress you out? And you can see here, I indicated that I wasn't as excited about having a fast-paced environment. I'm kind of slow and easy, gets the, wins the race type ideology. But you'll go through that, and you'll indicate what's essential or unimportant to you. And after you complete all 3 assessments, the skills, interest, and values, what it'll do is it'll turn out a career path or career fit for you. And it'll rank it based on your skills and your interest, how you scored those different areas. So for me, you can see that I had a lot of, high up on the list was science education, both to non-scientists and teaching careers and academia. And you can see as you move down the list, it's not as, the skills and interest match aren't as high. So those aren't the areas that I really scored higher in. So there might not be areas that I really want to pursue. The caveat here is that you're always going to be learning new skills, and your interests might change. And so I would say that when you do this the first time, maybe go back and revisit it as you move through your education, because it'll help you as you learn new skills in writing in particular, because it'll ask you in this assessment about skills in grant writing. At the time I first did this, I didn't have any skills in grant writing, but I've acquired those since then. And so that might skew my career fit a little bit differently now. So it's always good to revisit that and see where you kind of match up, and maybe that can help guide you into some, focusing on opportunities in certain areas or certain career options. So that's a tool for you to use if you haven't or would be interested in doing it. And again, we'll make that link available, or you can look at it through the slides once I give those over to you. So I do want to talk about why most of the presentation is focused on career options in research or PhD scientists. I want to talk about a little bit about the clinical and professional tracks, because I know that individuals are often interested in those tracks. I mean, they obviously have very several pros. The earning potential is high. It's typically prestigious and valued, and it's an altruistic profession. You're helping society. Some of the cons is that admission to these professional schools are sometimes hard, and it takes several attempts for many people. And I know several friends who have tried, 3, 4 times to get into medical school, and it's not until the 4th time that they finally get into a medical school. So it's just, you have to have a little bit of persistence there for those. Also, the training length. A lot of these clinical professions sometimes you can train for years upon years. So that's something to keep in mind. And then student debt is another thing. Medical school can get quite expensive, and it's something to consider. I think that for those of you interested, some things to keep in mind and help to improve your chances of getting into professional schools. Obviously, GPA is important, but it's not the make or break. Admission tests are important as well, but getting those extra experiences, research experience is a big thing, volunteering in clinics and things, leadership experience, job shadowing, as much as you can get to supplement that application and that GPA and admission scores will help go a long way in you getting into those programs. And obviously stop me at any time if you have a question, or type it in the chat. Keep going back and forth, making sure that if anybody types up a question, I can answer that. But now I want to focus on kind of the research and science tracks that I told, but we're really going to focus on for this particular talk. The idea years ago was that when you did a PhD, you stayed in a laboratory setting. So you did your PhD, you did a postdoc, and you became a PI, and you did research, you had your own lab, and that's just kind of how it flowed. And it was all thought of that these alternative careers really weren't as valued as they are now. But I think the thinking has shifted a lot, and there's now a greater push to explore the different careers that us PhD scientists can do. So what you'll see is that there are a variety of careers out there, and this is just a Venn diagram here showing academia, the traditional track, industry and government nonprofit, and there's a lot of overlap between the two. So there's a lot of career options, and we're going to talk most of them, but there's even overlap between them, right? So I wouldn't say limit yourself. Even if you decide you want to do a PhD track and you think you're going to have your own lab, I can promise you there'll be times during your PhD training where you will maybe second guess that. It happened very frequently when I did my PhD. I was like, okay, I don't know if I'm cut out for this. I don't know if I want to, write grants the rest of my life or this or that. And so it's okay to explore other options and see what fits you as a unique person. So the traditional academic track follows this particular kind of movement. Graduate student, you do your PhD. That takes you anywhere from 4 to 7 years, and then you move into a postdoctoral fellowship, like I'm in currently. And some of them are unique. The one I'm in is more unique because we get these teaching experiences and career development coursework. But then some of them are very research driven. So you can find a wide variety of postdoctoral fellowships to really customize your training experience. So after the postdoctoral fellowship, typically you're supposed to go to assistant professorship, but that doesn't always flow like that. Sometimes people have to do a 2nd or 3rd postdoc. Sometimes postdocs transition into an instructor role for several years and then move into the assistant professor realm. So there's a lot of uncertainty, and it's really dependent on the positions available at the university, the monies that are available for that. So there's a lot of uncertainty. So you can kind of sit in this position for longer than you would anticipate, though it's not ideal. You want to kind of move quickly to one of these instructor or assistant professor positions. I will say that this is only for those research intensive institutions. So if you're interested in academics and you want to teach and you enjoy teaching at the college level, there are teaching intensive institutions that are that are out there, right? Liberal arts schools, smaller schools that really focus on teaching science. So those options are available. And what we talk about when we talk about the research intensive versus teaching intensive is the soft money versus hard money. So soft money means that you're required to bring in a lot of your salary from grant funding. So the onus is on you to write the grants, get the money to cover your salary. The university will support you to a certain level, but the expectation is that you bring the grant money in. And then for these teaching intensive institutions, a lot of times there's more hard money situations where your salary is set and your salary is dependent upon your teaching load. So while a lot of people do write some grants, you don't have to rely on grants for your salary. So if you're interested in teaching science, but you don't necessarily want to see, you don't see yourself having a big research lab, there's those teaching intensive institutions that are there. And then there's a mix of in between where there's some institutions that have a little bit of research going on. It's very undergraduate driven. So you kind of just have to see where you fit at as a person if you're interested in this traditional track. And then we're going to dive into the alternative careers. Again, the alternative is not really the term we want to use. It's just the other options that are out there. And it is diverse, and they branch from, close to academia and then way out in left field where they're just a different field of its own. So we're going to piece apart these a little bit more, and then we can ask questions at the end, or we can ask questions during. Just let me know if you see a career that interests you that you want to know more about, and I'll do my best to address it. All right, so the first major alternative career track for PhD scientists is industry or biotech. We've seen a lot of talk in the news about Pfizer and Moderna being really pushing the envelope for the vaccines for SARS-CoV-2. But there are a variety of biotech companies out there, and these companies have deep pockets. So depending on when you complete your PhD training, if you want to continue to do research, the option is there to do it within these settings. And I will talk about the three kind of realms within industry that we typically see. So if you look at the research scientist part, that's a lot of like what PhD scientists do in academia. You do bench work, you do experiments, but it's typically a team-based environment, and the goal is to really move the envelope to meet the goals of the company. So if you're working on a particular therapeutic area, so you'll be doing a lot of, you may have a particular drug that you're assigned, and you'll be doing all the preclinical testing in animal models. So you have a very focused set of responsibilities and experiments that you'll be doing for that company. What you'll see is that the salaries for these types of positions are pretty notable. They can go anywhere from $90,000 to $140,000 per year, starting out, depending on the company. So it's definitely a lucrative career to get into if you're not as interested in the academia side of things. The caveat here is that a lot of times the companies are very profit driven, so it kind of takes away from the scientific inquiry part of it. So that's something to keep in mind. So the second option is if you're wanting to get away from the bench but still have a hand in science, product specialists. So these particular individuals become experts in the equipment that a lot of the labs like ours uses on a daily basis. And then when the equipment malfunctions, which it always does, inevitably you have your equipment that will poop out on you. We can contact these product specialists to help us troubleshoot. They can either do this on site through the phone saying, hey, try this, XYZ, or they can actually come on site and help us kind of prepare the equipment. They also do a lot of the on-site training for the equipment for these biotech companies. So they'll come in and spend the day. Sometimes they'll bring lunch, and they'll teach you how to use all of the bits and pieces of the equipment. And then the salary for those individuals usually starts out around $70,000, but you can work your way up through the company. There are also sales specialists that are on the sales side of things, and they're the ones trying to get you to buy the equipment. But the product specialists come in, and help you to kind of make sure that you maintain it and keep it in good condition. One of the other away from the bench positions that we see a lot now and is becoming really popular within these biotech companies is the medical affairs teams. So medical affairs, really what the roles are, and these are typically called medical science liaisons, and they serve as kind of the scientific expert for all the drugs that are entering clinical trials. Or it can be a device too if it's a therapeutic device. But what they do is they facilitate crosstalk between the biotech company and the clinicians that are conducting the clinical trials. So this person is given a territory where they'll meet with the clinicians on a daily basis at the hospitals. They give presentations about the drug or device, and they serve as the expert. Anytime the clinicians have questions about side effects or anything, they contact the medical science liaison, and that person is the face of the drug that they're talking about. There's a lot of travel required for these types of jobs because you're given a territory, and that may be 3 or 4 different states, and so you'll have to travel to those sites and meet with the clinicians and physicians to talk about the drugs that you're working with. But it's definitely lucrative. It's typically you start out around 120,000 to 160,000 a year. So and you work your way up. You can work your way into management and be making over $200,000. $200,000 per year. That's a lot of. It's definitely a lucrative career. There's a lot of travel involved. So sometimes with individuals with families, it's a little more restrictive. But it's definitely a hot career now in biotech. So I do want to say one caveat about people interested in industry-based jobs, and there are some exceptions for those that aren't interested in the bench work, but those that are interested in the scientific positions, doing the experiments within the biotech companies. Typically, those laboratories are housed in the Northeast, Boston area, also on the West Coast. Although there's a lot of biotech companies popping up throughout the United States, these are kind of the hubs that we see. So if you're interested in one of those research scientist jobs where you're working in the lab, you typically might have to relocate to some of these hubs to do that. But I will say that those medical science liaison jobs, medical affairs, product specialist, a lot of those are remote and they have offices throughout the country. So you don't necessarily have to relocate to those jobs, but for the ones that you're actually doing the bench work, you may have to. So another career that's interesting that it's for those of us interested in writing who have a talent in writing or scientific or medical writing. So the typical jobs you see with that and scientific writing are the editors of scientific journals. We're always trying to publish. There's an editorial board that oversees that, and so those positions are a good option for someone who's interested in doing a lot of writing as a career. There's also science journalism, editing services. Science editing services are becoming very big because a lot of non-English speaking countries will outsource some of their writing to these editing companies so that it can be published within the United States. So those companies are becoming more and more popular. And then there's grant writing for those who are interested in who have a skill in that, because it really is grant writing is a skill that is important, and some people are very good at it. You can work within a company within those within scientific writing, or you can be more of a freelance worker. Particularly with science journalism, it's more freelance. You can work for different publications and pick what you write and where you work, who you work with. And there's a big range for these types of jobs depending on which one you follow. I mean, it can be anywhere from 40,000 to 85,000 a year. Now, the medical writing jobs are a little more specific, and they're related to the biotech or pharmaceutical companies. Typically, what you do for those companies is you are taking all the complex jargon that we use in the lab and making it and condensing it down to where the general public can understand it. And so people who have a knack for doing that, simplifying complex concepts, are really good in these types of jobs. So what you'll do is for the biotech company, you may talk about how the drug works, but talk about it on a level for publication that will the average person can understand. There are also other writers that are more involved in regulatory documents for clinical trials, and that's really a skill that takes some development because it's a lot of paperwork that goes into that, and there are medical writers that facilitate that. The jobs, these are, since they're with biotech, they typically have a higher salary range from around 107,000 per year to 150,000 per year. Because they're the biotech companies, again, they have deeper pockets and their salaries are usually more competitive. Consulting. So for a long time, I didn't understand what consultants actually did. I had a lot of friends and during my graduate work that decided to go into consulting. And I was just like, so what do you actually do? Well, what they do is they typically work for larger firms, such as Kinsey and Company or Boston Consulting Group. And what they do is that large companies, typically when they have a large problem that they want to solve, they'll contact these firms and say, hey, we need a consultant team to help kind of guide our decisions on this process. So that may be something like, we want to make sure our university creates the most inclusive and equitable environment that we can. And so they'll hire a consultant team that'll come in and do all the background research, look at all the data, and help them to develop a plan to accomplish that. It can be something even as minor as we want to determine what the best way to set up our hospital so that patients are most satisfied. But then our consultant team can be called in to do all the research to figure out what appeals to patients. So it can be a variety of questions. They're big questions. And PhD scientists are really good at that because they're natural problem solvers. They develop that skill and cultivated that skill, and so it makes them great consultants. And the firms, depending on the firm, it can be, they can have different specialties. They can have more of a healthcare skew, or they can have a retail specialty, pharmaceutical specialty. There's a lot of travel involved. You work with a team that travels to location and does the research and develops the plan. It's a very fast-paced environment, very deadline-driven, but it pays really well. Scientific consultants make between 115,000 a year to 150,000 per year. Then there are also options within the government and military as well. So if we think about the benchwork research that we've been talking about in academia and in industry, well, there are options available within the government and military as well. So you can do not only research, there's policy, administration, program management. A lot of what we see, particularly like with the CDC, which is a government agency, a lot of microbiological research, immunological research is done there. So people with those unique skills can really find a position for themselves in that. They do a lot with emerging infectious diseases. We see they're doing a lot of research with SARS-CoV-2 now. In the military, there are research labs that study bioterrorism. So if that interests you, or you see yourself within that realm of microbiology, immunology, there are a lot of labs within the government and military to really facilitate those interests. And typically, they pay very well. The salary ranges between 75,000 to 120,000 per year in those, depending on which agency and which job you're doing. Public policy is another a job that we don't often think about in the context of science, but it's definitely important. You know, it's important to be involved in our legislation, both at the state and federal level. And there are a variety of ways to do that, and there are a variety of organizations to accomplish that too. But here are just a list of some of the potential jobs. A lot of them are analysts. So looking at the data and the public health data, or if you have an interest in epidemiology, you can make a good analyst for these governing agencies and help them develop plans for health-related concerns or scientific concerns. And PhD scientists they're great analysts, right? And so if you have the skill set to do that and interest to help create better public policies, we definitely need individuals who can accomplish that. But they can work at the government level, but they can also work with specific scientific agencies like the NSF or the AAAS. And there's a large salary range because the career options in these are pretty broad. But typically it's between 40,000 to 100,000 per year within these positions. And then there's patent law and intellectual property. So if you think about what research is doing, we're constantly bringing new knowledge to light. And sometimes there needs to be individuals who have specific skills that help them to navigate the legal processes involved in patenting scientific ideas, new methods that have been developed in the lab, or devices that have been created. There needs to be individuals that know the steps, the legal steps that need to be taken to make those properties available to the public. So really, the patent law and intellectual property field is kind of the intersection between science, business, and law. And so it's those people with interest in legal matters really make a good fit for these types of these careers. But it may require some additional legal training, but it doesn't always require that. If you get targeted experience within those areas, you can kind of work your way in with a PhD. I know that my alma mater, Baylor College of Medicine, we had our own legal department, and so we had a patent law division and an intellectual property division. And I remember one of the students who graduated from our program, she had a PhD and she was able to do an internship there, and she found a position there. So you don't necessarily have to have legal training, but it does help to kind of understand the language, because it is very different language. So the salary range for those positions varies widely as well, and anywhere between 64,000 a year to 136,000 per year. Let's see what else I have here. So I think the final career that I'll talk about, and then we can maybe ask questions and have a little more discussion, is really the education or outreach and nonprofits, right? So if you think about all the health-related associations that are out there, the American Lung Association, American Heart Association, Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, a lot of these individuals have scientifically minded leaders in place. And they really work for these public organizations and societies to promote science and health-related efforts as it pertains to the organization. And they can be anywhere from volunteer coordinators for some of their walks or runs that are associated with it. Then you also have like museums that need scientifically trained individuals to design or curate exhibits or scientific programs in place. So there are a variety within this unique niche itself. There are a variety of options available. They typically, it's hard to put a number or salary range on those because they're very diverse, but it's typically between 20,000 and 60,000 per year. But it's hard to say because there's so many organizations you could be part of. But it's definitely something that for those of us who are interested in really giving back to the community, if you have a disease that is close to home or close to your heart and you want to be involved, they have a lot of positions in these types of organizations. So I want to kind of end it. I know I threw a lot of careers at you, but I wanted you to see the broad spectrum of careers that are out there for STEM and research. Leave you with a quote. The only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking, don't settle. And I would say that is definitely true. You're early in your science careers, explore, find opportunities to get mentorship in different areas, and find a career that brings out the best in you. And be open. Like I said, I was really kind of going the medical school route for a long time, and it wasn't until my, I think, probably junior year of college that I decided I wanted to do research. So be open to change, be open to explore new career options, because in science and research, there are a lot more. And I just kind of scraped the surface today, but it's definitely a wide array of careers out there. and I'll take any questions, and we can maybe have a discussion with anything that you guys want to talk about, really.